where did the whole process start with Divergence? Because I know you've talked before about how you got started with Calamity and then with Downfall. What about Divergence? How did that start?
It was one sentence said by Matt at a lunch that he and I and Travis had together, where Matt was talking about the height of his ambitions for Exandria Unlimited and marvelously and generously sharing his gorgeous world, and talked about, in terms of broadcasting where different adventures or stories might take place, was talking about the past. And just, I remember there was this thing he said about, like, yeah, we could do stories set here, or exploring this, or even going back to the Age of Arcanum. And there was something in Matt's voice that I was like, I immediately latched onto as like, ooh, that is something that Matt thinks is really cool, and he's right to think it's cool because it is very cool. And then it started with Calamity, I think, is the initial pitch, and then Downfall became an easy next step because of how critical that was to understanding the relationship of the prime deities and the gods to Exandria, and the focus on, in campaign 3, of trying to wrap their heads around the nature of divinity in this world. And by the time that happened, it just felt like, oh, well, we followed the chronological order of some of the most major, I would say that there are so many wild historical events in the Calamity, but if you had to pick your top 3 for the ramifications they have going forward, I think outside of Calamity, Downfall of Aeor, Divergence are probably your 3. So it really, by the time Divergence came around, I think it really was about realizing that we had delightfully put ourselves in a position where it's like, oh, this is the logical. I think both of us woke up to discover, oh, this is a trilogy and this is the last chapter, right?
Yeah.
Like the shape kind of, we were sort of following the directives of the shape that was clearly forming.
Yeah, and part of those discussions about Divergence too, once we decided, like, we want to do this, the inspiration's there, this is awesome, let's go. It was like, well, we did a high level 20 mortals at the height of society, you know, sparking the Calamity with their hubris and tragedy, to Brennan helming the gods themselves in mortal form, kind of re-emergent as their terrifying and awe-striking powerful selves in the hardest choice they had to make in history, second hardest choice technically. Where do you go from there? And, you know, Brendan out of the gate was like, well, it can't be anything but the ground level people who are those who have suffered, survived, and rebuild in the wake of what's come before. And like, once he said that, it was like, well, this is exactly what the tale has to be. It was too perfect.
You know, it feels very, in the degree of, like, you come full circle, but it's also the other side of the, like, if Calamity is how the powerful how the powerful doom themselves and the world, and how they try to redeem themselves in that last moment, then Divergence had to be about how the common folk prevail. And it felt like that was the absolute bookend needed for as the underline of the Calamity, right? You know, seeing those level 0 characters, seeing Matt's choice to stick with level 0 the whole way. I loved it. I loved it.
That was so fun.
Yeah, to say that's bold. I mean, with the whole level 0 character stuff, was there anything that kind of inspired you to go in that direction? I mean, it immediately made me think of Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, where you're terrible and everything can kill you. So was there anything that kind of inspired you for kind of going in that direction?
You know, it's funny you mentioned it. Actually, like, as we were playing it, Matt, I took a lot of inspiration from our Kingdom Death home game that has been on a little bit of a hiatus because of life and madness and craziness, everything else like that. But in terms of the absolute punishing reality of late Calamity horrors, it felt I drew some inspiration from, you know, I think that there's a for lack of a better word, I think that the people's relationships to power, we don't do ourselves any favors by neglecting the hedonic treadmill of escapist power fantasy. Like anyone who's watched Dragon Ball Z can tell you, the numbers, every bad guy is always the same amount more powerful than you were the last one you fought, even though the number on the scouter goes up. You know, like, so in a certain degree, finding water in a blasted wasteland is the same challenge as facing down Arc Magi in the heart of the Factorum Malleus. You know, it's like, it's the Malleus Factorum. There's like that same challenge is proportional. And I think it's just as and stakes are about what the characters are feeling, for me at least.
Yeah. Was there ever a moment that you were like, oh God, I've killed them? This is, it's all gone wrong.
I wanted to get one. I thought I had Phaedra dead to rights. I thought that pneumonia, first on-stream character death from pneumonia. Let's go.
Dude, it was real close there. We were all clenched tightly at our player side table points. It was real tense.
Oh yeah. I was ready, man. I was really ready. I thought we'd get a character death in there. I had my whole plan of like going after that episode and talking to Jasmine and being like, so Torm's Hill has these other characters and we can get another character involved in this, all this other stuff like that. It was really exciting, man. It was really fun.
That's cool. Well, talking of exciting, Matt, I know that Exandria, it's been kind of a group effort to build it up into what it is now, but you are the guy behind the wheel. So what's it feel like to hand that to someone else? Especially because, Brennan is exploring all of these different avenues kind of in your world. What does that feel like?
It's, I say this without any, shred of construct. It is the greatest experience. Like, to create something is one thing. To create something and then watch others make it far more meaningful through collaboration than you could have ever done yourself is, in my opinion, the most pure act of creation. It's a communal act of creation. Exandria wasn't meant to be intentionally. It evolved out of love and collaboration at the beginning of all of this. People have watched now over 10 years something evolve that was not intentional, and as that intent became necessity out of the nature of just this growing brand and business and media opportunities to see the world live and breathe in many unique ways, it also became not just necessity to share in its ever expanding existence, but the greatest joy that I have probably ever experienced in anything creative in my time. Is I love to live the antithesis of the Artur theory. I want to forever wave the banner of many minds make the best art.
I'm going to leap into this question that was for Matt, just to say it's a beautiful answer for Matt, and I do need to absolutely jump in and say to have Matt in his beautiful collaborative spirit. And of course, as a dungeon master, you're making the world with and for your players. But I will say Matt's characterization of that collaboration from a guy who walked into it is like walking into the Sistine Chapel and someone being like, do you want to do an improv show here? And you're like, I don't know that I will call this straight up a equal collaboration. It was beautiful when I got here. But to Matt's, so I have to give the man his flowers because he's a totally, perhaps the most generous creator I have ever worked with. And it's so, but to say it how I feel it, Exandria is so stunning, and we owe it all to Matt, and it's very beautiful to be able to tell a story in a world that has this much love and care put into it.
Amazing. Matt, I appreciate you might not be able to answer this, so I'm going to ask Brennan instead. Brennan, as someone who kind of occasionally jumps into Exandria, where would you like to go next with it?
Gosh, we just did this trilogy, right? And I've all of my stuff has been in in the ancient past of Exandria. Parts of the past that are left. I said in the thing, I said I never need to go back to the past of Exandria, and then immediately I was like, well, actually, how did the schism unfold precisely? Which is an interesting thought there. No, but I think the past has been settled. If I were ever fortunate enough to go back into Exandria, we would go to the far-flung future. Exandria 3044, cyberpunk Exandria.
Hell yeah.
That'd be so good. There we go.
There you go. That's where we go.
The voice of the Tempest is the head of some sort of corporate conglomerate trying to secretly fund eco-terrorists against like the major corporation.
Precisely, exactly, 1,000,000%. You go to Craghammer and it's just a giant fleet of dwarven server banks, like Mines of Moria style.
I love it.
There we go. That's the pitch. I'm in.
There it is. Oh, you heard it here.
Sold.
So, I mean, with when we said that we were going to be able to talk to both of you, our colleagues got really, really excited, and that's definitely not an unusual response. How does that feel to be kind of held in that kind of esteem?
Wild.
Surreal. Deeply strange, but lovely. Thanks for the kind words. They can't be processed.
Yeah. Yeah. Like me and Brennan have been doing this for a while and collaborated for a while amidst all that, and we still stop ourselves in the middle of conversations and go like, wait, just take a moment to realize that we're sitting here and talking about dragons and world building and just getting to do this thing that we've always loved to do, but now we have like compatriots and arms to do it with together, and people care about it. What the hell? And that's just when we're alone. So when other people perceive us through the process is another like, how is this still happening?
1,000,000%. There was literally a moment the other week where me and Matt were looking at each other and totally unironically we're like, we got to figure out dragons. And it was like, and you're like, oh, it's a wild thing. I think that there's a degree that doing work like this, you are heavily rewarded for there's a degree of like taking the weight of that, of like the recognition of work. But I actually think that it's important to stay grounded in the reality at the table. And the funny thing about that is, weirdly, even when people are very kind and clearly appreciative of the work you've done, which is wonderful, and you prefer that to the alternative, right? But there's a degree to which even when people are sharing those feelings, you want they and you are both benefited by you taking that, but not letting it affect the authenticity of what you're doing at the table. I think people want that to remain unaffected. So at the end of the day, I try to stay rooted in the joy of being creative at that table and trying to let the reality of cameras and all that other stuff, trying to let that melt away as much as possible, because it's appreciated by everybody. It's appreciated by audiences. It's appreciated by collaborators, so it's like, to the degree that you can take the spirit of what is meant and then return to a grounded place, I think is to everybody's benefit.
Yeah. And a strong lifelong threat of imposter syndrome helps that dramatically.
Oh, for sure. For sure. Hey, people say that dissociating and compartmentalization are bad. Talk about some world-class psychological tools. All right.
Agreed.
I think that's just being a dungeon master, though, isn't it? I mean, like, I'm a dungeon master myself, and I think you do have to have this real disconnect and real imposter syndrome. You just have to live it, because, like, if I'm pretending to be like a Damphir who owns a library, I've just got to own that, and then I am that person for 2 hours. Yeah. Imposter syndrome, it's fine.
Yeah,
entirely.
I want to have like double swords, and they're named dissociation and compartmentalization. That's the name of the twin blades of success.
I'm making a note of that.
Compartmentalize.
Incredible.
Yeah, for sure.
So I suppose kind of speaking of kind of DM stuff, also a DM, I don't know if you guys are the same, but I love to kind of go all in on my sessions and kind of make props and things. But with kind of new virtual tabletops coming out, I was wondering what you felt about things like Sigil and Dungeon Alchemist. Is that something you would ever be tempted to use?
Without having dived deeply into those tool sets, I am always going to be a fan of any piece of artistry that enables play to become easier. My 14-year home game, eventually, 3 of us lived on the West Coast, 3 of us lived on the East Coast, 1 of us lived in the middle of the country. And playing remotely was the only way to keep the game fresh in our heads. And I think that there are people that live in areas of, if you have a live game group that can all meet.
Oh, no. Gotcha. He's back. Hello.
See, that's the exact kind of digital tool set that if you invest in I think that there's a real, a lot of people can only play through that remote or digital play style. And I think those people, any tool that enables them to do that is always very welcome. I think Matt and I are very fortunate to benefit from a lot of high population density in careers that attract people, that there's a high Venn diagram overlapping with, voice actors and improvisers. You're going to find a lot of people that want to play tabletop games. And then I think on top of that, you also have a fascination and interest in, if you're playing in person, then, the pencil and paper route is available to you. Miniatures and battle sets are.
Something's possessing him.
I know.
I want you to remember that everything I'm saying is from the heart, and these digital ghosts are trying to stop the message.
Yes,
and they can't.
Absolutely.
I agree. No, it's about preference and availability of game groups, honestly. Those tool sets, I've spent a little bit of time toying with it, and as a person who has spent years doing my own custom campaigns and Neverwinter Nights back in the 2000s, and have spent countless hours building immersive Minecraft dungeon experiences, I love using those tool sets for specific sort of experiences. For tabletop games, I prefer the in-person, the very visceral eye contact in the moment scenario where that tool wouldn't be as helpful for me. But as Brennan was saying, the situations in which that sort of remote experience is all that's available to you, or if there's a way to utilize that as like a secondary reference tool on like a monitor just to kind of show visuals, I could see that being a very, very cool benefit. So I guess we'll see in time. At the moment, I don't think it fits my play style for what I have availability for, but I see many places where it could be a very, very useful tool.
So switching gears slightly, with both Calamity and Downfall and Divergence, it's kind of, we've had a lot of grim circumstances. Everything's on fire. How do you keep the mood light and kind of not get too bogged down with the tension that's there?
Well, look, tabletop games inherently have a baseline percentage of slapdickery. No matter how dark you're trying to make it, trust me, I've tried to make things very dark, but when you have a Sam Riegel at the table and a Laura Bailey at the table, there's only so far you can push it. But that's part of the spark of what makes it so fun, is naturally it is a dynamic exploration of story and genre. So for me and my experiences, it's, leaning into it where you can, but leaving room for it to play against it. The moments only feel so dark when there is levity to release the tension, or to compare it to, or to let the next rise of ominous music and still pointed pauses to be that much more impactful. So I think finding that balance comes through experience and just knowing kind of the flow of story, following where the players are going. And if things are getting on a jokey moment for a little bit too long for the mood you're trying to hit, that's when you hit them with an unexpected moment of absolute danger or extremely dark promise. And I'm getting to exercise that in my upcoming Age of Umber miniseries, in which it is intentionally a very, 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 very dark series that already, in talking with the players, is going to be its own challenge.
Brennan, go.
Go. Man, I'm not trying to escape shit. I keep hearing about escapism. I'm not plunging into the heart of Fantasia to the seat of the throne of the childlike empress to do anything other than find the secret wisdom I can take back from realms supernal to tell a story about a better world that we imagined together. So for my money, stories of myth and legend and fantasy are where I go to find joy and play and meaning. And I think that I mean no disrespect to anyone who both seeks escapism, but I see the term escapism get applied to like places where we can feel good. And that's not what I feel good if I'm not in a story that doesn't feel like it has something to do with real feelings or thoughts, or in some way like connects to life or what it means to be human. I would never go to like and this, maybe I remember being a kid and playing house with my younger sister, and she would be like, "We're getting blueberries for pancakes," and I was like, "What's that outside? Something rumbling in the woods." And she'd be like, "No, it's not." So I've always had this issue. I need there to be something rumbling in the woods. I like stories where we can talk about how we're feeling, and I don't find any relief or reprieve by hiding my face from the darkness I perceive in the real world. Turning my face from that doesn't give me peace. It doesn't give me anything to look away from that. So it's not to say that I'm in the business of just doing like pure allegory, but it is to say that I think the great fantasy stories are about things that give you something that matters back in life as well. So when I say that I'm not trying to escape shit, I mean that telling a dark story during a dark time is what you do when you use stories to make your way through the time you're in.
Yeah, I'll say off that, there's a difference between power fantasy and empowerment fantasy. And the ability to create a world to play in that has terrifying conflict to surmount and a heroic journey as people who you would not consider capable of doing so, but in spite of that knowledge still manage to fight for that victory to make the world a better place, is exactly the crucible that lets us learn on how we as people in our world can be better at changing the dark parts of our world around us for the better. In small ways it may be, but like that's the empowerment fantasy that I strive for.
There's a thing I remember talking about a while ago. Maybe Matt, we've talked about it before, but it's a feeling I had for a long time as a philosopher, as someone who loves fantasy storytelling but studied philosophy. I always got to this point where I was like, the tough part is that our most hopeful stories are fundamentally like soft and cuddly. Like you see a Care Bear defeating, like, it's Mr. Nasty or whoever the Care Bear villain is. It's like, it's Mr. Rude. Oh, we got you, Mr. Rude. We defeated you with the power of caring. And then stories that get really nitty gritty about the harrowing nature of evil, you get like Cenobites or fucking H.R. Geiger monsters. And for me, the story I most aspire to tell is I want to see a Care Bear kill a Cenobite. I want to see evil get as bad as it can get, and then for a fluffy little Care Bear to Care Bear stare Pinhead or some other Lovecraft. I want to see Cthulhu get Care Bear stared in the face and die. That's what I'm here to do. That's what I feel like my job is.
Well, Maddie, I know you had a couple of questions that you wanted to sort of put in there, so please.
One of the ones I really wanted to touch on was sort of transferable skills within D&D. So as a dungeon master myself, I often find that actually sort of hosting D&D each week and becoming different people helps me with real world stuff. Like it helps me with confidence. And I've even put on CVs that I run a weekly meeting of friends and I organize that because that makes D&D sound a bit more professional. Not that it needs to, but you know, it's a good. It's a good
that threshold very soon where you won't have to hide it.
Yeah. So I was just wondering what you guys think about using D&D to help with transferable skills in real life.
My mom told me when I was a little dungeon master, I started DMing games when I was 10 years old. She said, as I was growing up, she was like, the great thing about you running these games is that you'll be able to transfer these skills to whatever you actually end up doing for a living. And the no transfer necessary. It's just those skills. That was really surprising about becoming a dungeon master, which I did not expect to happen. It's really, really wild. There's no job I've ever held that isn't fundamentally resting on a foundation of what I learned to be and do as a DM. Bartender, teacher, camp counselor, it's all resting on a bedrock of learning to run games for my friends. Every job I've ever had, either both in how you create together, how you speak to people about how to overcome creative problems, and how to make people happy, how to go, what is going to make my friends feel joy in this moment? It all rests on that. So I think that 100% of the skills are transferable, especially the weird random parts like being the one who has to set up the doodle, which that shouldn't, why is that my job? I'm already making a map and a map log. Why do I have to schedule? Why don't you do that? But they don't. So, but they simply don't. So yes, you should put on your CV, conflict resolution, schedule management, all of it. It's all accurate.
Absolutely. I mean, games like this are being utilized as team building exercises than like major corporations. And I see exactly why. I learned how to manage a group and how to deal with conflict resolution within that group, how to teach teams how to collaboratively work and solve problems with their varying skills within a group setting. Even before that, like before I got to high school, I was a very awkward, introverted nerd kid. Now I'm a slightly more extroverted nerd kid. But it was through D&D that I began to find my voice, to be confident in a public speaking environment in which I was not at all. Growing up a stutterer, not at all. And then learned an emergent love of performing arts, which gave me enough nerve to try out for high school theater production, which led to my career entirely. So like I owe every facet of my life in ways I never would have expected to emerging as an adult through role-playing games. And those skills, time and time again, I see being so crucial to people in all forms, whether it be production, whether it be programming, and whether it be teaching, whether it be so many different careers have some set of skills to pull from this experience, and some more than you'd ever expect.
Yeah.
I just want to know what your guys' favorite NPCs you've ever made are, because for me, Matt, my favorite one you've ever made was Pretty. He made me cry because I loved him so much. And Brennan, I really loved Slitch. I quote 10 big bottles of booze to my fiance on the daily. So
Pretty's a fun pool. I will always have a soft spot in my heart for Lady Allura Vysoren, because she, closer than any NPC I've ever played, is my self-insert to play with my friends in my world. Mm-hmm. You know, she was this kind of matronly arcanist who was trying to guide a bunch of these idiots, through their early story narrative. And it wasn't until later reflection that I realized that she was more or less me in the world. And even Lady Kima, her partner, is very much a character that was inspired by Marisha when I put her in the world too. And so, yeah, Allura will always be a special little nugget of myself in Exandria.
I want to shout out my favorite Matt NPC, which is Zorth. I really fucking love Zorth.
He's just a little businessman. Don't marry.
Really gets you going, man. I love that freaky little guy. What's he up to? Oh, it's great. Favorite NPCs. I'm literally looking at a little statue of Jawbone right now, so I may have to say Jawbone, the werewolf guidance counselor. But I also really love Ida Eggfort. And then, man, there are, I would say, of the people that I got to create in Exandria, I think that, well, I didn't make him up, but I love playing the Lord of the Hells. It's probably my favorite dramatic. And then this is a weird deep cut, but I do really love Pharaoh Mine the Sphinx from Calamity. Just a Sphinx who came to repay a favor and really got tangled up in a big to-do, and then was just trying to saying, you know, the coming out and helping at the very end of that battle. He stayed with me as a character that I really enjoyed. There's so many, countless.
I'm gonna hop in here and throw in a Brennan favorite of mine from the first time I ever had a chance to play with him in Bloodkeep, Escape from the Bloodkeep. Good old Avinash, a little improvised bugger who just really wanted to make sure the bones were going where they needed to be.
There was such a torment of those PCs in that moment who were so rightfully like, well, the dungeon master only says important things. Everything the dungeon master says is a plot hook. And I go, I didn't know you guys had like a tree stride spell. So straight up, I made this guy up right now. And the things he's saying, let's be clear, don't matter. He's not part of the plot. He's just scared about his bones. It was a really special time to watch it dawn slowly over all 6 PCs. Like, oh, this guy is not credible. We should not pay attention. This is not a mouthpiece for where Brennan wants us to go. This is not even a red herring. This is a rotten herring. This herring is bad and should be thrown back in the ocean.
Those are the best NPCs. I have a similar one called Tormash, who my players hate. And he has the most annoying, horrible voice, and they hate whenever he appears because he is just a big red herring.
I think that's all the time we have. Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys.
Have a great rest of your day.
Ben and Maddie, have a wonderful night, y'all.
You too.
Thank you.
Bye.